So I'm afraid to say for you, for me, and everybody, beef is in some kind of race with gas prices to ruin the summer here. We've got a chart, for those of you who haven't done your shopping, or like Lynn Altman at my lunch table today talked about ChatGPT do your shopping. So here's average price of ground beef. You see it kind of goes one direction a lot. And for a lot of people, this will be sort of part of the big inflation wave, maybe, but it goes back a lot further than that. So maybe that's where we start. Why are beef prices so high? Debbie, you want to take it, or Jared?
No, go ahead.
I think both of us can speak to that. So I'm going to be able to give you today the perspective, boots on the ground, right? From the Kansas Cattle Ranch. Y'all have been using a lot of terms that I'm not familiar with, so I'm going to give you guys some jargon terms of on the ranch. Why are beef prices where they are today? Yeah? So it is the cattle cycle. It is a supply and demand cycle. We've had a lot of drought across the country. Quite frankly, eastern Kansas hasn't had drought. But when you have drought, when you're not getting rain, you don't have grass. And if you don't have grass, you don't have anything to feed your cows. And the tough decisions are for those of us then that don't have grass but have cows, what are we going to do with them at that time, right? So if I don't have anything to feed them, I have to move them. One way or another, they have to move. And then those cows don't have a calf to feed you all, right? That calf then goes into the market, the beef market. Doesn't have an animal then to go on through. So things are really slow, but foundationally, Mother Nature is in control of almost everything I do.
Yeah, I think, to kind of add into Debbie's, and I wear a pretty unique hat. So our family would be my kids actually represent the 5th generation on our family farm and ranch there in Northeast Kansas. And so as you think about what led us here, it truly is the drought, right? There's 60% of the U.S. today in a D4 drought. That is a significant issue where folks are not able to build this cow herd and rebuild the cow herd. So we're seeing the tightest supply, in 75 years. We've heard that earlier today. You think about plant capacities, and as we're creating that competition to go bid on those cattle, we're running 70%, 72% of our capacity. That creates a lot of demand. So it truly is supply and demand for those live cattle. And then likewise, we've got great demand, from consumer standpoint too. So it's kind of unfortunately, it's just kind of this time of the cycle that we're seeing.
Yeah, so for people shopping here, they might look at the prices that they see at the supermarket or at the restaurant and ask themselves, there's something broken in the market. We hear this question in DC, but what do you say to that?
Yeah, I definitely do not believe it's broken. I think it's a cycle. I mean, we've seen it time and time again where, historically it's a 10-year cycle. This particular one it's deeper than we've normally seen it or what we've historically seen. And that's the length of the drought. It's what we're seeing. I spend a lot of time, whether, with the administration or either side of the aisle in DC, and it's really about what are we going to do to rebuild the cow herd? And you think about how can we invest in rural America? What does that look like to help like that tipping point? And a lot of it comes down to grass. So, opening up CRP for grazing, there's emergency use of CRP today.
So say what CRP is.
Here. Conservation Reserve Program. So this is ground that's taken out of production agriculture. It's got grass on it. Today, that's not functional for producers. So that's an idea to help us actually create more resiliency for these farms and ranches that we can actually grow this cow herd back.
But I think, from my perspective too, there's a whole lot of other things that have been going on. And your graph is really interesting to me that it starts in 2016, was at a time that we were coming out of another cycle, right? Another drought cycle. We were rebuilding or stable at about that time, 2014, 2015. We had high prices then too. So the cattle is a cycle. One thing that really is different today, though, is the fact that in 1985, I remember voting on the beef checkoff. And that is a self-help program that cattle ranchers and anybody that touches a live animal, so feed yards, packers and processors, every time that animal sells, that $1 goes into that fund. And that money is used to promote beef as well as to research things about beef. And at that time, people started listening to consumers. We started learning that people were not getting a good eating experience, and what can we do about that? And to me, that has a tremendous impact on today because we've listened to consumers, we've changed our genetics, we've changed our feeding strategies, nutrition is slightly different. We're doing a spectacular job to bring you the product that you want, and you still want it, right? So not only is supply and demand a little goofy right now, but you guys still want our product, right? So that is fundamental to what's happening today.
Jacob, just fair warning, we're both pretty fired up about the beef industry, so I'm gonna just kind of fuel off what Debbie just said. So you think about in 2014, the last time we went through this cattle cycle, so we sold off a significant amount of the cow herd at that point in time. And what we've seen is as we've rebuilt the herd, you know, ranchers like Debbie and myself, we've rebuilt the genetics differently. So we've actually improved the genetics. So if you look at the grade, we've increased grade anywhere between 10 and 15% from that time to today, and we're actually continuing to see that grade continue to go. So what that means is as a consumer goes into a retail market or goes into the food service, when they have an experience with a steak, historically, maybe 1 in 3 of those would be a negative experience. Today, I mean, they're having a very positive experience, which is actually now driving them back.
Describe a positive experience with the steak.
There is an outstanding experience for anybody that would like to enjoy a steak. Yes, okay. When you're eating the steak, and it's not tough. It's tender. It's very satiating. You know, there's a great nutritional density to it. It's awesome.
Should have had you on before lunch.
Yeah, should have had steak for lunch.
So you got this luxury priced beef, but you're not raking in the cash off this.
We definitely are not.
Explain why that is.
Yeah. So we're, you know, last year and the last several years, actually, I mean, we're talking hundreds of millions of dollars of losses in the beef business. You know, Cargill, 160-year company. I'm very fortunate the fact that we're well diversified. So it allows us to continue to make the investments, you know, not only in our teams, but our people. But as you think about it, it literally is the cost of what I'm buying the animal for, what the processing cost is in the center, and then actually what the sales price. And even though demand is really, really good, there is a point in time where consumer says, hey, I'm not going to pay that, and then I'm going to go look for another protein. So what we call that is actually the cutout value. So the value of that beef carcass, and what's occurring right now is we're below a break-even price, so losing, you know, $250 to $300 a head on where that is. So that's the variance that we're seeing today.
And when you say we, you mean?
Yeah, the packers specifically, because you, Debbie, on the other hand, walk through that a little bit.
Yeah, so it's really hard for a cattle rancher to tell you that they're doing really well, but quite frankly, I have the supply. I am the beginning of the whole beef value chain, and I'm the one producing what y'all want. And it's pretty good right now. I'm doing pretty good right now.
Okay, so here, explain why you're not cashing in, getting as many cattle as you can out there.
Yeah,
you're limited.
I'm a seed stock producer, which means that I am creating the breeding animals, okay? That I sell registered bulls and I sell bred females to help other ranchers build back their herd, just replace part of their herd each year, that kind of thing. So I am the beginning of the genetics that Jared mentioned, right? That's looking to make a better product and to help all of those people that buy cattle from me. And in Kansas right now, eastern Kansas, I am not in a drought. So I am at a great number of cattle. I'm doing really well right now in grazing management and producing a lot of calves from those cows. We're in a good nutritional situation, and everybody wants my product. So honestly, cattle ranchers right now are doing well. That will totally change when the cycle changes. It feels like an adversarial position with the packer, but we need each other. I need you to buy my calves. I need you to process my cattle, right? So it's not really adversarial, but when he's not making money, the producer probably is. And when the producer is not making money, they're probably doing better. But I need him to make money, because if they don't, then they're going to shut down their packing capacity. They're going to cut down. And then when I finally have calves, more calves to sell, there's not going to be a place for them, not the demand. So it is a cycle. It is vitally important that we continue that cycle. And I think that's foundational to the whole price conversation.
So when we were talking before about the capacity for the cattle rancher in a general sense to respond to this demand signal, that's how they use it.
Yep.
Demand
Yeah,
signal.
no, spot on.
The constraints represented by the drought, you've had wildfires in this part of the country, and there's something interesting that we both talked about going on where people are looking further afield. Talk about what you see as far as people putting their cattle even further out.
Yeah, so Debbie and I both kind of reside from the eastern part of Kansas, and so clearly we're in the garden spot of Kansas, per se. We've actually had quite a bit of moisture. We've got grass. You go 20 minutes, at least 20 minutes straight west of me, it gets extremely dry. You get western Nebraska, they had significant fires. You get southeast Kansas or southwest Kansas, they've had significant fires. So if you think about it, our family, specifically with us, you know, it's 5 generations of genetics that we've actually been building. And if we ended up getting into a significant drought or you had a significant fire, we couldn't get the feedstuffs to come in. What we would actually look at is, can I lease ground in other states that do actually have grass? And we'd actually ship cattle and let somebody else manage them for a summer while we rebuilt, you know, the grass and the grasslands. So, and that is occurring. So you've got ranchers that are making that decision. Simultaneously, the Torrington livestock. You know, I read an article earlier that was talking about they normally at this time of year they'd go to 1 cow sale a year or a week. They're actually doing 2. There's so much liquidation because they don't have the ability to feed those cows that they're having to actually sell those cows, reduce those herds. It is a significant concern.
And Jacob, that's heartbreaking to me. That is heartbreaking because it takes so long to build back that genetics, to build back those animals. If, let's say, my family decided that it's time to expand today. So I have baby calves on the ground. They will be weaned in the fall and they'll be a year old next spring. If we chose then to breed them, make them breeding stock for us to keep and expand our cow herd, this is the nation's cow herd, yeah? They calve at age 2. And then their calves then will be born in 2 years. And then if we choose to sell them and market them into the beef business, they then go at not quite a year old, and then they get fed and marketed another 2. You're looking at 4 years before a decision today makes a difference in the supply.
And we have a chart that we can put up as well that will show kind of, and this one's over a much longer time horizon, Debbie, but the overall U.S. cattle supply, and you can kind of get a sense of where things are.
Yeah, so the folks that can't see that, so 27.8 million head is, if you think about, this is actually the overall cow herd, but when you think about the beef cow herd, 32 million would have been a high during COVID. We're down to 27.8 million head is where we're at. So when you look at this number and when you hear Debbie and I talking, we're specifically more talking about the beef cow herd. This actually would include all cows, cattle, calves, everything.
So we'll go to questions in a moment here, but I wanted to touch back on something that we both discussed last week, which is a new sort of, I guess, positive and negative for the building back of the cattle herd, and this is the AI data center equation. And I know, Jared, you've got kind of a view into the application of AI in your business as well as the potential change that data centers bring to rural America. Debbie, you see this on the front lines as well. So what's the positives and negatives of this?
Yeah, I'll kind of jump in. I think the data centers is part of it, but it's actually the amount of ground moving out of rural America or moving out of production agriculture. That's really the basis of it. The data center is one component of that. So the data centers, they'll take 600 to 800 acres. It's very significant land mass that's actually being removed from American agriculture. On the flip side of that, though, I can't sit here and tell you that Cargill's not using AI. So as we think about how we're using AI and making sure that we're using it, very deliberately, because we're going to need the data center. So there's two sides of this entire equation that we got to think about. Carve is an example. So what we're doing with Carve is actually using AI to help us maximize the amount of meat we're getting off our bones, and looking at that and helping to train employees, which is actually now maximizing how I'm using that carcass, right? So as I think about the caloric availability in that animal, and how do I make sure that that goes into human calories and not into a further byproduct type item. So again, it's a balance, but it is a concern. The amount of ground that we're seeing move out of production agriculture is something that we really do need to keep an eye on.
So I'm a former chairman of the U.S. Roundtable for Sustainable Beef, and we obviously discuss sustainability. All of the different sectors in the value chain are involved in this organization and talking about that. And fundamentally, the most important thing we can do is keep land in grass. Grass sequesters carbon. Grass is what we feed cows. If we can keep cows grazing on grass, we sequester more carbon. So any land use change that happens to my grasslands, I'm against. I'm not going to say I'm 100% against data centers. I use AI. I use technology. They're vitally important to me as well. I just wish that we could pay attention as to where they go and not lose grass.
We can scan for questions here. Yes, right there, third row.
Hello, I'm Kevin Boyd with Amerisan. I remember a number of years ago, I believe it might have been in Trump's first term, but in the pork industry, I was talking to a client, and they were saying that there's huge amounts of pork in freezers in supply. Is the supply on processed and finished getting significantly reduced in the beef space as well, or do you speak to that at all?
Yeah. So as you think about, so I think the basis of the question is what does supply, what does the finished product look like? It is actually flowing well. So we aren't stockpiling beef or anything like that, right? I mean, you think about the demand of what's occurring. There was the conversation on imports earlier, and imports are important. Like, we produce an excess amount of fat. So you think about what's moving through the freezers, a lot of times that is the imports that's being moved to help us utilize that fat meat. I also truly believe that from an import standpoint, it is a balance. We need to be an exporter of beef, but at this point in time, the size of the cow herd, if we did not have the lean imports coming in, we would not be able to utilize that entire carcass, which candidly would not be good for the entire industry.
I think there was one more, yeah, right there, and it's got to be quick, I'm afraid, as we're counting down on the time.
Well, of course, when we're short of time, I'm going to ask a question that might require a longer answer. But when you think about these cycles and sort of hedging against future cycles, I'm wondering what, from a rancher's perspective and from a packer's perspective, you think about how your companies, your senior leadership teams should be thinking about cellular food and creating, beef through biotechnology. I know the technology is not there to make a steak today, but are you thinking about your company's roles in that future, which could potentially smooth this curve you just talked about?
Well, my perspective of that from the cattle rancher's perspective is God made this amazing animal that uses that cellular product to create high quality, nutritionally dense beef. So I'm going to continue raising beef and using that cellular. I mean, they take things that we can't eat and make it into this high quality protein with zinc, iron, and protein, and it's awesome. So we're going to make more of that.
Yeah, when I think about it, it literally goes back to how do we look at the grasslands and how do we make sure we're investing, whether that be, we've got a partnership with McDonald's on the Grassland Trust, because that's honestly how you start to like make that a balance, or you get rid of the severe drought. You create more drought resiliency, and you see that. From a Cargill standpoint, candidly, we are aware of, and we do invest in, and we have looked at that, right? If you look at the investment, we do not think that actually replaces animal protein. I mean, we continue to invest heavily in animal protein and are extremely proud of that. But we also believe that we are a protein provider. So that does mean, whether it's alternative, cell-based, I mean, we're going to be active or at least involved in it. But that doesn't replace our beef industry or the value-added protein or any of that.
And fundamentally, though, Jacob, we have to come back to the fact that consumers have said they want beef.
Yep.
Right? They're still enjoying our product. And that is, to me, the foundation of all of it.